So, welcome. I'm with Sarah Shaffer here on my podcast, Don't Follow the Shepherd. And Sarah is a corporate wellness expert. She has a background in social work, a master's degree in social work, and she's had a lot of lived experience. It speaks to significant trauma and resilience and overcoming all of these things. And she wrote a book with a great title, The Dumpster Fire Diaries. Get off the hot mess express. What a great tagline. So why don't you tell us a bit about your background in more detail, what you want to share? Um, I think I really like the fact that you talk about your candor and your honesty about your story. Like myself, with my own background with trauma, etc., I feel like, yeah, if I were to keep it all in, I would go nuts. So
Implode.
for me, I sometimes jokingly call it pathologically honest, but I tell my story and very candid about it. So, anyways, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your background, what prompted you to write the book? I also noticed that you had experience with 9/11. Um,
Mhm.
that's always intriguing, and so go ahead, take it away.
Sure, sure. As noted, I've been a medical social worker for 25 years in the acute care hospital. I also worked for United Healthcare and all of those glorious little prior authorization programs that we speak so highly about. I developed and implemented those, way back in the day, because that's what was presented to us as the right thing to do. And I have my laundry list of traumas. I call it my life that looks 11 shades of Meredith Grey. Every corner you turn, there's someone else's arm falling off and a plane falling out of the sky, and the hits keep coming. And the purpose to my book was really to let people know you're not alone. I'm not unique. That's the kicker, is that yes, I can check off abuse by a parent. We don't talk about those things because the general public is not able to bring those to the forefront because it's just so unimaginable, right? So those who are survivors, feel very reserved about sharing any of it because what could be so wrong with me that this happened? And we live with that and we sit with it and it bubbles and what I call for Gen X, we do like the emotional spanks and we stuff everything down and we think it looks gorgeous, but the boob fat hangs out, the back fat, and your leg is numb because it's cutting off the circulation, but we think we look great. So the book is my story, and it includes everything from the abuse and the chaotic childhood, which we all have, and 9/11. My youngest survived a rare disease and stem cell transplant. The complications from the disease left him completely blind in his left eye, partially blind in his right. And he now has type 1 diabetes that's directly correlated to the stem cell transplant. So when we say the hits just keep coming, and if we don't have our bearing on the ground of, you know, I will be okay. Like I can manage these things. And I go real quick, real honest, because we know the things that are going on in our head. We know them. As a coach, I'm not going to tell you something monumentally new that you've never heard of before. I'm just the one that's talking about it. I'm opening the conversations. I'm allowing people to feel safe to be like, oh my gosh, she's not going to judge me because hell, she's done it all, and you pick yourself back up. It's the key lesson that I share with my children. It is the best gift I ever gave my children, was to show them that you can be down at the bottom of the barrel and get up. And it's possible, and it is a much more freeing, engaging, peaceful life when you own your crap. You got to put it out on the table. I know what I've done, and I've done some ugly stuff. And I owned it to my children. I owned it to myself. And so, really opening that door for these conversations is my ultimate goal of the book. It was very cathartic for me, and I loved it, and I loved doing everything about it. But my mission, my purpose is to get people to start talking. It's all really we need to do, and start having the really uncomfortable conversations. And we can span that out into, my work as a medical social worker and the uncomfortable conversations with death and dying. We all hate to talk about it, but guess what? Coming for all of us. And, it is important to me. It's not to normalize and it's not to diminish, but it's to say these things are real, but we can't do anything about them. I will never get my day in the ring, ever. And I have to, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to sit in my bathtub filled with filth and scrub it in and get in my hair? Or am I going to get off and rinse it up and live the life that we've got right now in front of us? And time is a luxury that we all believe that we have, and we don't. So that's kind of the method of the nitty gritty. Like, you want to dance around this for years? Sure, we can drag out therapy for however long you want. But is that really what we want? And is it really what we need?
Yeah, maybe you could elaborate a little more about just that. Like, there's therapy and there's coaching, and
Right.
strategy. So maybe you could differentiate between the two, because I try to hone in on that for people, uh, because I think I'm a strong believer in therapy. I certainly needed it, but I also see the benefits, of course, of a more proactive approach to resilience and building your own path and your own way with your under your own domain.
Absolutely. That empowerment. Right. And so there are, what I think as humans, and especially in our culture, is we look for that quick fix. We look for that immediate relief. And that's where we end up with all of the medications and all of this stuff, which, believe me, I've got a transplant kit. I'm not opposed to science. Therapy is valuable, but I think it misses the boat. Okay. Because if we are revisiting and re-talking about and just constantly re-triggering ad nauseum, then we're not moving on. And the coaching is, yeah, this crap went down. It's real. Yes, I was in a war zone. That is real. What do I want to do with that emotion? And that's where coaching comes in. It's not to dismiss, yep, that's there. What do you want to do with it? Where are you going to realign that energy that we're spending? And again, there's different levels, right? When people get to me, they're ready to be done. You're ready. Like, you have been to therapy, you've realized that it's just kind of rehashing the same things over and over and over again, and you are ready to move on. And so coaching really gets down to that strategy of it. Because these intrusive thoughts, the stuff that we've managed and we've put to rest, we can't control those intrusive thoughts. That's just the nature of the beast. So what do you do with them? What do you do with them when they hit you in the middle of the day? What techniques, what strategies, what systems do you have in place? Because it's going to come. And I think it's that acceptance as well. So I work my three pillars: awareness, accountability, and action. And we need to simplify. We know that we make things so much bigger in our own heads. We make things so much harder for ourselves. So coaching rims it down, pulls it right down to the common denominators. And typically the common denominator is you. I'm upset because this isn't happening. I'm upset because that happened to me. I'm upset because this isn't working. Where are you in that? And it's turning that mirror around and having someone to be accountable to that with, meaning, you're there, you're about to own it, but we're too afraid. And when you start to peel it down of, okay, what are you afraid of? These words that are about to come out of your mouth, the words, "it was my father who did it," that came out of my mouth, was the most freeing thing. But the fear, like I said, was, what are other people going to think? Who's going to judge me for this? And when we learn to accept that I'm okay and I'm who I am, and we learn to like who that is and be proud of who that is, separated from the instance. My big thing is the fire doesn't define you. What you do next does. What's our next step? We get stuck. So coaching helps you get unstuck.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Some of the behavioral modification, if you will, that I think of, or perhaps it falls under cognitive behavioral modalities, for example, not watching the news as of late. For me, a big thing is like, you know, we're in this era where people are talking a lot about empathy. We're more aware of emotional and social intelligence. But interestingly enough, we we fall victim, if you will, to social comparison. And we are inundated with cognitive distortions, like me in particular. Or I shouldn't say inundated, it's really my conditioning and programming that leads me to have cognitive distortions and adaptations, if you will. But I think of Teddy Roosevelt, who was way before his time, who said something to the effect of social comparison is the thief of joy. And,
Absolutely.
you know, it's interesting because there's so much content out there trying to help mitigate some of these issues, and yet in that same space we see people putting their quote unquote uh, best foot forward, and it's hard to sometimes reconcile that uh, people who like people like yourself who are very authentic are probably, I mean, you're not sharing all your wounds, but at the same time, you're probably not out there trying to pretend that everything's always rosy all the time. So,
Right. Right. And I think that that's the when I own my stuff, the vision that it opens in other people is unbelievable. And it's that self-deprecation, that what we were conditioned of. We are products of our childhood. I do not need a scientist or a doctor to tell me that. We don't need eons of research to tell us that.
right.
And I think so, to your point of the therapy and the research and the CBT and the DBT and all of those modalities, I implement them, but where I separate from clinical therapist is it's too restrictive. I can't speak to you the way I want to speak to you because there's some licensing board where if you don't like what I have to say, then we're going to complain about it. But I'll put right out there, I'm okay with that. If you don't like what I have to say, that's okay. That's my job.
Right.
And when you start to normalize it, I'm supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. I'm supposed to put you outside of your comfort zone because if you were fine inside there, you wouldn't be sitting in front of me. And it's that calling out the reality pieces. And for those of us who have had traumatic histories, our fight, flight, and freeze, she's been on fire since day one. So she has no idea what's real and what's not. So we sit in our head and everything is a four-alarm fire. How can you think clearly? How can you help direct your children? How can you do your career? How can you do that if we are so buggered up? So for me, it's that verbal vomit. Get it out. I don't care how wackadoodle. Dude, my kid has almost died twice. Let me tell you about the wackadoodle thoughts that go through my head. And having a person to share that exact, dark and twisty with makes all the difference because that transformation happens in a nanosecond.
Well, I also suspect that your work in the corporate space and corporate wellness and health has given you insight to help individuals because, again, some people fall back to this therapeutic approach to everything. entering a therapeutic relationship. And again, I'm not knocking that at all, but
Right.
I think many people who are seeking therapy have very dichotomous thought patterns as opposed to dialectic, and they say, oh, you're either a therapist or a coach. They don't see the hybridization. They don't see that, like, a really successful person, when I think of successful in industry, for example, CEOs, for example, who may have tons of coaches, but they may not talk about it, but they realize, hey, I can take that from that person and this from that person, and they have an appreciation for that dialectic. Where someone like me, my history in programming, if you will, has led me to be more dichotomous, so I tend to categorize things. But as I've healed and grown, I've learned to say, oh, that works for me, and that person has great insight, and so I've taken inspiration from different places.
That to me, well, first and foremost, we do not work on completing ourselves. I say that life is not a Jerry Maguire movie. Nobody's coming to complete you. This is work that we have to do in that storybook that we were told. You go to college, you get married, you find your Prince Charming, you have your kids, and blah 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 blah. Wait, that's not how life works. But that's what we were expecting. So the disappointment and the constant knockdowns come from where our expectations are up here and they're not realistic. So when we put everything out on the table, we start to connect dots, right? So when I have at 48 this epiphany after drinking for 30 years as a raging alcoholic, and I make this connection as to why I made all the really hideous, horrible choices and decisions in my life as a catalyst for it, but I'm still responsible for each one of those. It doesn't matter what that catalyst was. I'm responsible for my actions and behaviors. And that's where we've gotten and that's where I call things out directly of no, 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 no. We can no longer point fingers. We can't, and it becomes very weird and enlightening to look at yourself in the mirror. And I do this actually every morning. I look at myself in the mirror, and if there's a thought that's going through my head and I dart my eyes away, that's something I need to pay attention to. You know what I mean? Okay, that thought's not sitting well with you. What is it? And you look at it and we evolve it. So things that you're talking about, like taking it from here and here and here, there is no cookie cutter. There is no cookie cutter. And it's kind of it's how I developed the foundation and how I developed the cord blood program. And I did that completely pro bono by saying, you're fantastic. I need you in my world. You know how to do this. I need you in my world. And you do the same with coaches and with doctors and with whoever. There is no cookie cutter. And to understand that the primary work goes on here. I'm just something to kind of help you chip away. Let's pull these pieces out. Let's look at them. Are they real? First and foremost. Does everybody hate you? Does everybody think, is that real? Let's look at this. Well, no, I have this person and this person. Okay, so that's not actually real. But in your head, you're saying that over and over and over again. And we got to just get it out. So it's evolving. It's evolving. We have to evolve with the needs of our brain. Our brains are not the same as they were in the 1900s. Our survival needs are not the same. So we have to adapt and shift. And unfortunately, I think with traditional therapy, we get stuck.
Yeah, the other thing is maybe a perspective on the notion of what we're teaching young people in school. As a social worker, you probably think, God, I wish we taught more about finance, budgeting, personal budgeting, personality and social psychology might be more
Emotional
valuable
resilience.
than chemistry, resilience, um, you know, how to benefit from practitioners like yourself, that there's help out there. Go ahead, sorry.
And taking almost a proactive approach. That's where we've always, I mean, it's not until I'm sick in bed with a fever of 105 do I start taking medicine or start, drinking more fluids or doing whatever. We wait until we're in crash position and then we go balls to the wall. And that just doesn't work. I mean, you're in constant crisis mode then if we're waiting for something to build up. So in coaching, I focus a lot on the concierge piece of it, where life doesn't happen Tuesday at 3 o'clock. And if stuff's going down Thursday at 10 and you need, hey, Sarah, I'm losing my mind. All right, let's hop on a 10-minute call and we'll completely change the trajectory of your day. Now, is that traditional therapy? No. Does it work? Yes.
Now,
Because you're using the skills that we talk about in our sessions in real time.
how do you navigate? So you have Mason's Foundation, the Mason Schafer Foundation, and then how do you navigate, like, what's interesting to me is there's a lot of there's a lot of discourse today about organizational culture and toxic workplace behavior, blah blah blah. Someone um as evolved as you, emotionally, socially, etc., coaching, inspiring other people, how do you navigate the workplace? Maybe I got to be careful because I'm not going to say anything negative about your workplace, but how do you help other people in your own colleagues perhaps deal with some of the challenges of the stressors of, say, a medical culture?
Well, and I mean, so that's exactly, and it's one of the things I love to do. Physicians, nurses, these high achieving, helping professions that do not know how to separate between what I want to do and what I can do. And the the hmm, the culture of medicine is very hard to change. Even, introducing palliative and hospice. I am known as the angel of death. And when the surgery team sees me coming, they're like, ah, no, we don't want you. Because I'm saying, why are we cutting off the leg of a 90-year-old who has no idea where she is? Tell me why. Because you can? No. But even with the physicians who are realizing that medicine isn't this helping, because in the United States, we're going to be honest, we're not practicing medicine in the hospitals. We're practicing legal avoidance and family dynamics. That's it. Because if the family says that they want it, guess what? The doctors are going to do it. Where's the professional? Where's the expertise saying, I don't recommend this. This is not going to be beneficial for you. You can't sustain this out in society. So why are we going to do it? We're not having those conversations. So when physicians who have spent all this time, and I'll relate this to athletes as well. My oldest is a D3 swimmer. So you've put all this time and effort into this sport or profession, and you're realizing it's not what it's okay. I'll tell physicians all the time, you do realize you don't have to be a doctor, right? You can take this education and parlay it into whatever you want, because your brilliance and your thoughts are not anything that goes away. And that education just builds it. You just need to shift it. It's all about reframing, your mindset. Because if you're stuck with, oh, I did this and this is the only way I can go, guess where you're going to land up? The land of misery.
Yeah, these institutionalized cultures, I have other colleagues who are very interested in medical education and work with medical schools. And it's fascinating to me because I was a graduate student and a professional student. The cultures were completely different. The medical students, were great at, the rote memory, which lends itself to very discrete ways of thinking about things. Graduate students were more intellectual, and I don't mean this to demean any, the other. They're just different types of educational cultures. And it's fascinating to me because that does carry on into practice. And
Absolutely.
it's terribly unfortunate. Um, I mean, one of the things that I think causes so much medical trauma isn't actually, and this is second nature to you, but medical and health trauma, to me, are often uh, uh, created out of the relationship with the caregiver, not so much the procedure. Like there's so many ways. I was a preemie in intensive care at Case Western Reserve University, had a lot and had a lot of medical trauma after that. But I feel like God, if those practitioners could have been more empathetic and less rigid and dichotomous in their thinking, I might not have nearly the experiences that I had, even though I would have gone through the same procedures or
Right.
invasive surgery, et cetera. So it's just interesting to me. Um,
And it is. And I mean, when I'm helping families place their loved ones in nursing homes and everything, and they will ask me, where's the best one? And I say it's each individual experience. Now, we all know that nursing homes are a disgrace right now, except unless you have boatloads of money. And that's the reality of the world right now. And so, but there are patients who in the horrible ones are like, I love it. That's where I want to go back. I'm like, oh, okay. Because they have that connection. They have that relation. Now, I mean, I'll say even personally, my OBGYN, I didn't want her sitting by my bed holding my hand. But I wanted to get that baby out. Go do that. Mason's transplant doc, who Dr. Andy Cole, who's now the head of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, would come in and he would watch baseball with my husband. And he would turn to me and I would be sitting there and Mason would be head to toe rash and blah, blah, blah. And he'd say, I'm not impressed. And that taught me, okay, I got to watch him. I got to learn from him. If he's off his rocker, then I'm going to go here. Doesn't discount my maternal instinct because I went down that road very many times too. But to your point, when you say, "Ooh, you know what you're doing and the universe brought you into my life for a reason," I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to follow your lead. And as leaders, when you're talking about corporate and corporate wellness, this is where we're missing the boat. That disconnect of that personal and professional are separate. I'm not saying you bring in your trash into work by any means, but if you think you're functioning as an effective leader, if this is all buggered up with crap, no. And your responses and how you engage with people. And if leaders are share some vulnerability with their staff, there's going to be a connection. There's no connection right now. It's you're my paycheck, you don't care about me. I'm gone in a nanosecond either which way. There's no vested relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in my previous career, which was in the zoological field, working at these large institutions with uh, PhDs, veterinarians, animal care professionals who were not formally schooled but extremely knowledgeable, there was a lot more thought put into how do we help these people get along and serve the populations in need that they're serving, because unlike medicine where everyone seems to be credentialed, more formally credentialed, the ego is still there, but they don't have to think about, like, there was an institution, I'm just not going to mention organizational names, but that you weren't allowed to put doctor in front of your name or your title on your door or anything like that. There were a lot of thought into removing the ego, so that a very eclectic community of professionals could work well together. And I think medicine, the one place I think human medicine is behind the ball is in that space, because you know, even some physicians are put off by the notion that anyone else can have a title. Like it's a very fascinating
I have had to have conversations with surgeons and remind them that the letters MD represent their profession and their education, that they do not make them a superior human being. Doesn't go over well, but I still say it because somebody has to. You want to get mad at me? You want to go complain to the admin? Go, go. That says more about you than it does about me.
Right.
When people say you disrespected me, what does that even mean? Because the only way I can do that is if you don't respect yourself, and the concept of, oh, it's in God's hands, or I can't dictate to someone what they should do, is a load of crap, because you already have. The minute you stuck your grubbies in there, the minute you started to tell them which way they needed to go, you're the voice of authority, so they're automatically going to listen to you. We know that. And so, you know, it, there needs to be a shift in that responsibility.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? Because if someone says, oh, yeah, you should get dialysis, that's going to save you. Well, that's what the patient's going to do. But if they're not taking into account that you have pissed off your entire family, you've got no one to take care of you, um, you do not have the finances, you live on a third story walk up, and you can't move, why are we recommending dialysis to you? Just because we can. We forget about that survival of the fittest is emotional, physical, and financial. You have to have all three pieces of it in order to survive. And we've just kind of thrown up our hands and been like, nope, we're going to bypass that at all costs. And that concept that we as human beings have a right to live at all costs to everything and everybody else. I don't know where that came from, but and everybody's so afraid of death. I was up on the ICU the other day with all the young residents, and there were patients with just tubes and pumps and everything going on. And I said to them, I said, you're so afraid of the word death. I said, that's what you need to be terrified of, what's sitting in that room right now, and that you're perpetuating it. And it's just there needs to be a shift in thinking. And I'm not gonna, clearly I'm not going to change the world. We know that. But yeah, I'm gonna stick my 2 cents in there. Because if it's gonna give you pause for thought for just a nanosecond, then I'm good. I've done my job.
Wow, you navigate really interesting spaces with really interesting, and you have really interesting and insightful perspectives. Yeah, wow, I'd love to have you back on to talk about more of these things, in terms of like the organizational culture as well, because that's fascinating to me. But I don't want to miss opportunity for you to promote, your socials, your book again, any other projects you're working on, the foundation, anything.
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that. The Dumpster Fire Diaries is literally my story with my strategies woven through it of how I got out of my own damn way. That's it. This isn't meant to be some mind-blowing, but it's real. And it puts all of my stuff out there. And the coaching one-on-one is absolutely this game changer. And I do it on a very intensive, almost immersive. We're going to talk. We're going to get you through this. We're going to figure it out. And, the book, you can go to thedumpsterfirediaries.com and you can purchase a copy of the book. There's a free assessment on my website to kind of let you see where you're at. And then you can easily book a call. I've made it as simple as possible, because everybody's, I can't find a therapist. I can't find someone to talk to. I'm right here. And we'll make it, and it's the flexibility, because, and especially, and it is for a good portion, you know, dedicated towards women, and working with their schedules and the kids and this and that. No, there is no, just here's what we're going to do and this is what we're going to stick to. Uh-uh. We're going to evolve it. We're going to change it. We're going to shift it to what works for you and keeps your goals in line sight. So thedumpsterfirediaries.com.
Great. Yeah, wow. Fascinating. You have all the wisdom in the world. So uh I will share this, and then we'll stay in touch and talk about some other topics in the future.
I would
Try to
love
keep
to.
it kind of short because people don't have the attention span to go
No,
more
they
than
don't.
3 minutes. But thank you so much. Um,
I
but,
appreciate it.
uh, I'm so happy you joined me, and you were adaptable. You made the most of doing this from the workplace, which is fine. It looks cool. It's actually a very cool background, to be honest with you.
Oh, good.
So I appreciate you, and I look forward to talking to you soon. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
you're welcome. Okay, take care.